Welcome. My name is Pike Krpan, and I am the president of Fire Service Women Ontario. I'm speaking to you from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And as a settler on this land, I wish to begin my presentation by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the land we are on today. In my case, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. While we meet today virtually, I encourage you to consider the traditional Indigenous territories from which you're attending today and acknowledge the people who call these territories home. I make this acknowledgement today to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to improve relationships between nations. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and strive to consider how we each can, in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation. As I said, I'm the president of Fire Service Women Ontario, which is a nonprofit, member-driven organization whose goal is to encourage, educate, and empower women in the fire service. We are over 400 members strong, and I encourage you to check out our website and consider membership. All are welcome to join. The study I'm presenting today, Insights from the Inside, forms part of a larger project that we received a grant for in 2018 from Women and Gender Equality Canada, which is a body of our federal government. And the purpose of that grant is to study and address the barriers to employment for women in the fire service. The study is just a part of the larger project, and our next and most significant step is a diversity and inclusion strategy toolkit for fire departments. The Insights from the Inside study has a sample size of 1,364 completed online surveys and 26 in-depth face-to-face interviews. I want to thank everyone who completed the survey and participated in the interviews. We had 549 men and 195 women in suppression complete the survey, and most of the presentation today does talk about the experience of people in suppression. And another thing we noted from the research sample is that a good deal of the women who completed the survey had fewer years in the service. So many women who participated in our study sample were still quite new on the job. The Insights from the Inside survey covered a great many themes and topics, and I only have a few minutes today to share with you some of those themes. This presentation is going to focus on feelings of safety and exclusion in the workplace, and also will share issues with harassment and violence. If you'd like to know more about the study on any of these themes that I've listed here, please contact me, and I'm more than happy to share the study and the results with you. One of the first questions we asked the survey participants was if you would recommend firefighting as a career for women. And resoundingly, the answer was yes. Over 90% of women firefighters said yes, they would recommend. Nearly 80% of male firefighters and over 90% of fire leadership said yes. This showed to us the evidence of women having widespread support in the fire service. However, that being said, that didn't always translate to the workplace being a place of belonging for women. One of the women interviewed in our survey said this: "I just told you how much I love the guys I work with, and I know they love me. And you know, it's every day I'm reminded that I'm not the same as them, every single day. And it's so tiring. It separates me, and I can see why some women have isolation issues, you know, because they're different. They're the other. It's exhausting." As evidenced by this quote, this lack of belonging was not always malicious, or women were purposefully excluded. And the interviews we conducted were full of stories of supervisors, captains, and chiefs often trying to do the right thing by women firefighters, to include them and to show that they had a seat at the table, but they were often getting it wrong. We asked firefighters to assess their work environment in this slide. And really, the questions of the study fell under 4 major categories: recruitment, hiring, retention, and promotion. This slide speaks very clearly to retention, otherwise known as keeping people on the job, which is really just the question, are people happy at work? And resoundingly, the answer was that women really do love their work. Others as well that we surveyed said that. And folks really had a high assessment of employee morale. As you can see by this study, it was most positively correlated with the support of your coworkers, having workers who would defend you if harassed, and having leadership committed to making the workplace safe. There are some significant differences here between women, men, and leadership as well, as you can see from the chart. I also want to point out that having been harassed by your coworkers cut in half the probability that you would report positive employee morale. Next, we did ask firefighters about their physical and emotional safety, and 90% reported that their overall physical and mental health were good to excellent. However, when we asked more specific questions about aspect of their physical and mental health, some kind of concerns or issues started to emerge. In terms of physical safety, women and men support similar levels of feeling physically unsafe at work. Women, it was 20.2%, and men, 17.7%. However, when we talked about emotional safety, women reported much higher levels of feeling emotionally unsafe at work. And they reported 47.9%, and men 20.3%. The most common location of feeling emotionally unsafe at work was the fire hall. Many women reported that being ignored was a common experience. And we know that being made to feel like you don't belong has some serious mental health effects. The effects of social exclusion are heightened in this work environment, where trust building among crew members is paramount to your safety, and where strong familial type bonds are expected, what we call the brotherhood or the sisterhood. We were also not surprised, to discover that acts of violence and harassment were common, but by no means universal. In the in-depth interviews we conducted, just over half of women reported harassment. And in the overall study, you can see 58.4% of women experienced harassment and violence during their careers. But this was also an issue for male firefighters. 39.9% of men reported harassment and violence during their careers, but it was more common for men to identify hazing as the source of that violence or harassment. Also, another finding was that women who were victims of harassment were often asked to alter their behavior to remain safe, while the perpetrator was not. In a way, this endemic or very common harassment and violence we thought was related to this findings of this next slide is that when the efficacy of anti-harassment and human rights training in the workplace was low across the board. So you can see that clear differences exist between women, men, and leaders on this chart. But everyone up to senior leadership sees a problem with the efficacy of the training. So many reported that they didn't think their officer or supervisor had the skills to manage discrimination and harassment. And 80% of all firefighters said they were unhappy with how an issue of harassment was dealt with. And only half of women said they would even report future harassment. Women also reported that they were reluctant to pursue these issues through the unions, but also found working with senior leadership disappointing. So we thought this shows that there's a real need to address the efficacy of anti-harassment and human rights training in the fire service. Now that's just a small taste of some of the findings from the study. In terms of next steps, Fire Service Women Ontario, as I mentioned before, we're using the data and the recommendations from this study to incorporate into a toolkit on strategies for diversity inclusion for fire departments, which should be released by the end of this year. We also hope to hold another Chiefs Roundtable. The first was in 2018 to review these strategies and have them adopted by fire departments, and then also reporting back on how they worked. And we also identified some future directions for research. In particular, we thought it might be important to survey women who have left the fire service. Also investigate what mental health supports might be very effective for women firefighters in particular, and also identified the need for better anti-harassment and human rights training that is specific to fire departments. So like I said, this is a small introduction to our results, but do reach out if you'd like a copy of the report, and watch our website at www.fswo.ca for the next steps. And feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.